Hey, and welcome to Matt and Jess TV. I am Matt Rose.
And I'm Jessica Bun Bun.
Welcome to our Yellowjackets Season 3, Episode 7 reaction and review. This episode is titled Croak. Everybody let out a good old ribbit in the comments if you enjoyed this episode. Who would have thought... Ribbit. Who would have thought frogs were going to have such an important role in Yellowjackets Season 3?
This was a really fun episode. I really like this episode, the way that it all played out, having like the chase after the team and everything, that it just unfolded really well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think this season has occasionally been a little bit up and down, but this is the second straight really good episode of Yellowjackets. We got some insight on these new people. I'll be honest here, like I knew that theoretically frog watchers were a thing. Like, it's not something that's blowing my mind when it comes to a concept here or whatever, but actually seeing it on the show, especially since, you know, I was so far down the birdwatcher rabbit hole with all of this, I was genuinely surprised. And as somebody who loves frogs, I don't even mind when they turn the characters into frogs in Final Fantasy VII. Like, I really enjoyed seeing these stories and these backstories play out.
Yeah, a lot of us thought that they were going to be bird watchers because that's what had been set up on the show. Yes, I know that there's interviews out there and stuff like that that has confirmed before that it was frog watchers, and that's fine. But for those of us who aren't out there reading the interviews and who are just watching the show, bird watchers is what we've been calling them.
Yeah, so now they are frog watchers, but we get some interesting insight on their role in the past. One of them has already gone. And then beyond all that, as we'll get into in this review, in the present, it turns out that Hannah, the female frog watcher who was out there, is it her daughter who is the person behind the tape and everything else? And beyond even that, how did the tape get into her possession in the first place?
That is the biggest question coming out of this episode. How did this tape get out there? We know that Hannah recorded this tape and this sort of goodbye to her daughter and all of that. And we saw her bury that whole recorder. But it sounds like the two people that got very close to her, there's a confirmation now that they are dead, which is Melissa and Jen. We've all been out here being like, Melissa is Hillary Swank. That seemingly is not the case. If what they are saying is true, Melissa and Jen, they are not there.
Yeah, I will give some applause to Yellowjackets with this, because I think they did a great job of leading us to think that this was going to be Melissa, because we were getting all this screen time for Melissa so far this season. Like, Jen's never been a character who's had a lot of screen time, so like I never really thought that much about her, but the Melissa hype was just really, really there. But I'm trying to figure out the Hannah's daughter possibility of all of that. I'm sure we will get more into it into this video.
Yeah.
Before we do, though, be sure to hit that subscribe button, because we're going to be here with more Yellowjackets Season 3 coverage over the coming weeks. And in addition to that, we just wrapped up an incredible second season of Severance. We're doing The White Lotus, and coming down the pipeline here, it's not that far away, is The Last of Us Season 2 premiere, as well as the start of the final season of The Handmaid's Tale.
Yes, thank you so much to everyone who has been hitting that subscribe button and helped us reach that milestone of 70,000 subscribers. It's been really exciting time here at the channel. And if you want more Yellowjackets coverage and to support us further, I've got a link for you below in the description to our Patreon, which is a way to help financially support us here at the channel to keep bringing you videos here. But we are also covering exclusively over there The Pit, which is airing on Max, Bosch Legacy in its final season coming up, and we're going to be doing reviews over there for that as well. And if you are a Star Wars fan, Andor is coming up. That is also going to be on our list of exclusive videos over on our Patreon.
All right, so thank you guys so much for your support. We really appreciate that.
I love that they just casually dropped that Jen and Melissa are dead. I thought that they were going to be kind of like pulling at that for the rest of the season. We may not even know until next season. It's just like, oh yeah, well, you know, yeah, they got close to Hannah over time, but like, it can't be them. They're dead. I was like, oh my God.
It was smart, I think, for two very, very different reasons, and I appreciate both of them. I mean, number one is that, and this is one of my biggest frustrations with Yellowjackets over time, is that they have just kept so many cards close to the vest when it comes to who's alive, who's dead in the present, when realistically it would come out here and there. Like, it's not something that they would talk about like all the time, but if there are more people alive and you're just going to make me believe that they're just never mentioning them, it gets weird. So I appreciate it from that angle.
Yeah.
I also appreciate that this is a signal that, okay, Hannah's not going to be taken out in the near future here. Like, she's going to be around for at least a little while, and that introduces some new dynamics, certainly some new question marks, because now, the Yellowjackets could presumably get some information about the outside world that they haven't had in a really long time.
Okay, who do we think brought the tape back?
Okay, this is where things get so tricky and so hard to figure out.
It's Natalie.
Oh, okay.
I think it's either Natalie or Akila, and the reason why is both of these girls are so caring. They really do care quite deeply for people. Both of them we've seen, nurturing people, nurturing animals, trying their best to bring out the best in everybody, and they want to do the right thing by people. And we've seen Natalie make some very hard decisions, like with Ben, to help, let him just pass on something he had been begging to just be let go. Very difficult thing for her. She's a teenager having to do something like this. I think that if she came across that tape, and we saw her in this episode, like, no, don't kill anybody. This is our way to like get back and like have life and not do this anymore. I think if she had come across that and she heard that goodbye message, I think she would have brought that back and gave it to her, or brought it back and sort of had it in a special spot with someone that she trusts to be like, if anything ever happens to me, send this to her so that she knows that her mom was thinking about her in her final moments.
Yeah, I had two people that were in my head at the end of this episode. And one of them was Natalie, for all the reasons that you've mentioned. And beyond just that, because the fact that, Natalie is dead in the present,
right,
it makes it so that there's not really a surefire way for the other Yellowjackets to get answers, to get information, unless you are finding some way to bring Juliette Lewis back and having some sort of flashbacks, or you could just do that with Natalie in the past and find a way to figure it out that way. So Natalie was a big one. The other one I thought a little bit about was Misty, just because if there's one thing we know about Misty, it's that she be messy. And we've also seen her already do things and keep secrets from the rest of the Yellowjackets. And this might be something that she did just thinking that, oh, it's never going to come out. Nobody's ever going to think about it. And because she did have affection for Coach Ben, somebody who tried to do the right thing a lot of the time, she might have thought, okay, you know what? This is the right thing. But with all of that being said, I'm kind of wondering if it is Misty, like tinfoil hat, and they do end up coming across Hannah's daughter, which certainly feels like it's coming. It's like, is she ever actually going to have to admit the truth on this? And like, if so, how's everybody else going to react? Because she basically would have opened Pandora's box in a way when it comes to letting somebody else try to get back at them.
Yeah, and if it's Misty, she needs an Oscar for being as surprised as she was that that tape is out there and that it was brought back. But I mean, she's very good at keeping secrets. And I do think that for as messy as she is and some of the terrible things she's done, she really does care about people.
Yeah, I do too. And I think that would be what motivates her. Like, if
she doesn't have a job in health services because she doesn't care about people.
No, like, if I really had to choose exactly between one of the two, I'd probably lean either in the direction of Natalie, or if there was somebody else who came out of the wilderness who maybe they're still alive, maybe they died along the way. I mean, you mentioned Akila. Akila's still very much a mystery at this point when it comes to her fate. But now I think we have to pose the inevitable question, because we've been asking this question all season long about Hilary Swank. Is Hilary Swank playing Hannah's daughter at this point? Because my biggest question is, like, I'm not sure how old Hannah's meant to be in the past. I mean, it seems like she's a little bit older than the Yellowjackets, but we also
a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not good at judging ages.
Okay, they're teenagers. If she's a researcher and seeing Edwin and about how old he is, they both look like they're probably in their 30s. I know that she looks younger, and we just did recently a video about Who is Pit Girl. We've got that here at the channel, and that there are some people out there that are like, oh yeah, Hannah looks younger. She does not look like a teenager, and she does not look like she's even in her early 20s.
I think the thing I've been struggling about the most is just like, would, Hannah's daughter be the right age for Hilary Swank to play her?
And that's the thing. If she left on the tape that she was a teen mom, if she is now like in her early 30s, 29, 30, somewhere around there, with the time jump, Hilary Swank makes sense.
Yeah, I can see it. And it does make the most sense at this point, because otherwise you're just thinking, okay, we're going to randomly bring in Hilary Swank at this point to play some other character that we haven't set up really at all. So let's just assume that this is Hilary Swank now. And this then brings us to another very important question, which is, there's the mystery of like how she got a hold of the tape in the first place. But when did that happen? Like, is this a situation where she's had it for a while? Is she just like acting all of a sudden? Like, why is now the time she wants to go through with this?
That's why it feels like Natalie maybe had something in place, whether it was through Lottie and what was kind of going on when she was part of her whole Purple Brigade, where Natalie seemingly was starting to kind of find herself and feel a bit better about herself and wanted to make some better positive choices in her life, that maybe she was like, if something happens to me, please send this envelope off to Hilary Swank.
It's certainly possible, because I think, I don't want to jump too far ahead in terms of theories here, but it feels to me reasonably clear that it might have been Hannah's daughter who ended up killing Lottie earlier this season. And I think the reason why is that Lottie in the past killed Edwin. And this is
on tape.
Yeah, like what better vengeance is there than doing something like this? I mean, it does pose the question then, okay, well, Lottie was apologizing shortly before she died, but she also died in New York, and that's not where Hannah's daughter is, but maybe that's where Hannah's daughter was at that point. And so, it's not that far away from New York. She could have traveled back and forth without that much of a problem.
Okay, does anyone actually think that it actually just might be Shauna? Because Shauna is completely capable of killing Lottie, and she has motivation to do so. She's Lottie and them tried to kill Shauna at the end of last season for one, but then Lottie shows up at her house, is kind of like in ways romancing her daughter into this whole like wilderness, puts that necklace on her. That was the minute that it felt like Shauna could have killed her in that kitchen.
Yeah, she could have easily killed her.
And then you've got the receipts, you've got the DNA under her nails. It feels like if it's Shauna, I'm not going to be surprised. And it feels like, she would do something like this.
Okay, so this is my biggest frustration with Yellowjackets right now. And no surprise, it's the Walter character, because I feel like Walter is effectively there, like dangling, I don't know, a nice big white chocolate bar right in front of me. And they're just like, come on, grab the chocolate. But they keep like pulling it away from me, and I can never really grasp who Walter is, what they want for him, because they basically are just making him exposition man in this episode and being like, oh, here's the information you need. And then, oh, it looks like Shauna's the killer. It's like, okay, great.
All season they've been doing that with him. They just don't seem to know what to do with him, where he's not really connected to really anything except that he had a very brief relationship with Misty. He's just not really adding anything to the season except for information. And we don't really need him for that. We have Citizen Detective Misty, who could have figured that stuff out on her own. I just don't think that we needed Walter, unless there's going to be some huge Walter reveal this season. And like, please just bring it. There needs to be something more to him than he's just this like psycho Moriarty out here stirring the Yellowjackets pot for why? Funsies?
Yeah, like, is he a friend of Hannah's daughter? Do they have some sort of connection, relationship? Is there something going on there? Is that how this tape ends up going? Whatever. I'm also just thinking now, like, okay, if you are this woman, Hilary Swank, if this is who Hilary Swank is playing, you're in the spot where it's like, okay, you know that this tape has been sent at this point. So you probably know that there might be some sort of confrontation coming. You're dealing with people who are not dumb. They're going to do some sort of research. So have you, in the interim, been prepared? Because we certainly see at the end of this episode, Shauna's prepared for some trouble, but is she going to find trouble on the other side?
Yeah, the biggest thing for me is what's the motivation?
Yeah.
So, why would Hannah's daughter get this tape that has a murder on it and this goodbye message from her mom? We've seen the obituary
Yeah.
that Hannah isn't alive anymore. So, what's the motivation to take the evidence and send it to Shauna? I don't really understand. That's why it's kind of like, was it sent from her, or were there multiple tapes that were sent out? And one was sent to Shauna, one was sent to the daughter, one was sent to the police. Like, who knows, right? Like, I just can't figure out what the motivation would be for Hannah's daughter to not take that tape and just go to the police, unless it's like she wants money or something. But there's been no request for anything. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. And I think that's the biggest key to the puzzle is, what's the motivation?
Well, this is why I go really crazy with this idea that it's like, okay, maybe her and Walter are in league to some degree, and maybe Walter's given her a certain measure of information and
Yeah,
evidence.
Walter's got to be involved in some way, because he does love to just stir the pot.
Yeah, and he could be stirring the pot in a really, really big way here, where it's like Hannah's daughter at this point is thinking, okay, I'm going to get revenge on as many of you as I possibly can because of what you did to me. So I'm going to find different ways to take all of you out one by one in one other way. I'm going to do this to Shauna. I'm going to potentially take out Lottie, the person directly responsible for Edwin's death. And then I'm just going to like go from person to person to person. And she might have enough evidence to pull that off. And maybe she doesn't want to get the police involved for whatever reason, jurisdiction, I don't know, but it just feels like she's got to have something. You don't send this tape unless you know what's coming on the other side.
Yeah, because that's the thing about it, right? We don't know what happens to Hannah. It seems like from the conversation where it's like, oh yeah, Jen and Melissa got really close to her. Okay, so it seems like she's going to be around the camp for a little while then at this point, if that is the case. Does she actually die out in the wilderness or back in the present? I assume in the wilderness, but does she actually eventually help them get out and then she dies later? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm kind of operating with once again another crazy tinfoil hat here, that maybe Hannah is somebody who actually tries to figure out a proper way to communicate with the outside world, because we saw some efforts to that, but because of what happened earlier on with the Frog Watchers, they weren't really able to establish communication. But maybe she finds a way to figure it out. Maybe some people don't really actually want that for a number of reasons, whether it is we like this society, or Hannah knows too much. It's just going to be too problematic for us if we end up going back for whatever reason. It just doesn't land, and they feel like they have to take her out. Like, that's at least one possibility.
Well, here's the thing. So we had the three scientists, Edwin gone. Their actual guide seemingly is alive right now, but like, if that guy dies, they're all done. And I will say that what I really liked about this episode, something that I've been struggling with this whole time, is, yes, they've tried to leave twice, where, they had the whole wolf attack, and then you had a 16-year-old trying to drive a plane and it exploded. It's just kind of like, that's not enough reason to not go out again. To just jerky up some meat and hike your way out. You will eventually end up getting out. Like, you guys have been hunting and learning how to defend yourselves, so now maybe you can defend yourselves against the wolves or anything else that they try to throw at you. But now that we've met the hikers and their guide, and the guide is like, without me, you don't know where you're going. This forest is extremely dense. They can still hike their way out, but now they've established that it is very, very dense. But at the same time, they have a map now. They went back to the camp. They're like, okay, here's a map. Here's this phone that doesn't work, but here's some stuff that maybe we can figure our way out.
it's a source for potentially really good conflict coming up. And I think that's what this show needs. We always need there to be conflict,
For
but I
sure.
think having a possible escape route, but also a reason as to why the escape is so difficult, like that's really important. But let's have a Joel McHale conversation here for a moment because I am a very big Joel McHale fan. You
You
know,
are.
Community is one of my favorite shows. I mean,
I
ironically,
love to hate him on the bear.
that's the thing. He is great at playing jerks. Like that is Joel McHale's specialty. He's not a jerk in real life. He's really funny, but you know, Jeff Winger's a jerk on Community. He's a jerk on The Bear. They did not give him enough to do in this role as Kodiak, aka Cody. He's just kind of like this grizzled explorer guy who's kind of inappropriate with Hannah, and it's just like there's not a whole lot there yet, but at the same time, they have made it that he's still out there, so he is still a little bit of a danger. So I think that's exciting just from the vantage point. It's like, okay, we have someone now who does feel like a legitimate adversary to these characters where he knows what they're capable of. It certainly doesn't seem like he wants to just like hang out and party with them. So he's off somewhere in the woods. What is he doing and when could he come back?
Okay, so tinfoil
All right.
hat, Sean is going to kill him.
Oh.
So we saw, Travis and them get him, at the cliff and they help him up. And we're kind of like, okay, so what's going to happen now?
Yeah.
Is he going to be brought back? Whatever's going to happen.
Yeah.
I just think when we saw him shoot Melissa in the shoulder, Shauna was like, if she dies, you all die. So I just feel like they're kind of building to something like that now that we know that Melissa is going to die.
Yeah.
According to them in the present, she's dead.
Yeah.
So if there's a situation where, let's say they got the era, which they did, but let's say it gets infected and they don't know where the cache is because Ben has moved it and, they can't find it and they don't have the supplies because Hannah knows where the caches are technically, but if they're not in that hole anymore, then she can't help either, right?
Yeah.
So if Melissa dies, Shauna's going to kill him.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good possibility because I don't think we're going to see much older Joel McHale in the present. The odds of that just feel like way too low.
And Shauna doesn't seem to necessarily really want to leave. Like we saw Van be like, oh my God, we're going home. And we know that Nat wants to leave and some people want to leave, but some people do not want to leave. And if you have a guide here who can actually get them out, that guide needs to go.
Yeah, I thought for a split second after watching this, I was like, okay, maybe Cody took the tape, found a way to escape, goes back to the present. But it's like, so you're going to tell me that Cody then never gives the tape to anybody? Right. It's just, you're making it a little bit too unbelievable for me to really get fully into that.
Yeah, that's why it feels like it has to be one of the Yellowjackets that has this tape and they've been holding on to it until something happened to them or they felt like Natalie, she's making a life change. Things are moving in a different direction for her. She wants to start doing, right by what they did in the wilderness, things that she regrets, feels terrible about. And that maybe this is one of those regrets that she never gave that tape to Hannah's child.
Okay, well, I will now give the show even more applause for just the scene in which Lottie takes out Edwin. Chaos immediately ensues.
Yes.
This felt like a pure heart attack moment watching it because you don't see it coming when you're watching it, but it also felt so believable to how chaotic things would be in this very moment, in the split seconds after this whole Ben head reveal comes. I mean, it's ironic we're talking about Joel McHale because this reminds me, there's this episode of Community called Remedial Chaos Theory where you watch all these different scenarios of the same scene play out, but there's a big meme that's out there of Donald Glover walking into a room and everything is on fire and he doesn't know.
He has a pizza or something.
Yeah, it's like this was very much the Yellowjackets version of Donald Glover with the pizza where it was just like everything just goes like at once.
Absolutely. It was intense and it was so well done.
Yeah, I think they played that really, really well. Now, in terms of the larger lore of the show, like I think there's an interesting discussion to be had now about the connections between the Frog Watchers, the caches, all this material, this idea that, okay, research has been going on here for a long time.
Yeah.
How much is all of this connected to the origination of the cabin, the other people who may or may not still be out there? Because none of this answers any of that.
Yeah. All that's been answered are that frog researchers from before have been out there and
Yeah.
they put this cache here so that the next people that come out have food, have supplies, have whatever.
Yeah.
Who built this cabin? Where did
Yeah.
this cabin come from? If they are this far from
Mhm.
civilization, because that was always one of the things too, where I'm like, there's a fully functioning cabin
Yeah.
out here. So how did that happen if they're this far away from civilization? Who built this cabin? How many people built this cabin? Like, what is going on with this cabin?
I'm gonna put on a hard hat right now
Okay,
because
all
I'm
right.
already gonna say this. I'm starting to feel like we're not gonna get answers on the cabin this season. And earlier this season, I felt kind of hopeful that we were, because once again, there's that bonus episode that's out there. And I think that's tied to the origin story of the cabin. That's always been my theory. But it's like, okay, now that we're dealing with the Frog Watchers and now we're dealing with Hilary Swank, I think you're gonna kind of have the focus of the story be that, because you're not bringing Hilary Swank on to just do like a 2-minute cameo and that's it. I mean, based on her presence in the trailer alone, I think, one, we've got to be seeing her really, really soon, and she's got to be a big part of at least the rest of the season.
I agree. I know what IMDb says. So before you guys start like typing away about Hillary Swank and
Yeah.
IMDb, please take IMDb with a grain of salt,
Yeah.
because there are lots of networks and streaming services that fudge the episode numbers. Sometimes they're correct, but
Yeah.
sometimes they are fudged so that they are not giving any important plots away with things. So take it with a grain of salt. But I feel like we're going to see her in the next episode, because I think watching Shauna roll up on
Yeah.
Hannah's daughter's place, it feels like this is the character that she's going to be playing.
Yeah, and it feels like whatever happens, not going to go great. Because if you remember the trailer, at one point you see Hilary Swank, she's got like a big old bandage on her arm or something like that. There's going to be some conflict.
Yeah, Shauna's sitting in the car with a brand new knife.
Okay, so there's one more thing that I really want to get into here, and that is the scene with present day Van, who ends up being hospitalized over the course of this journey. You know, she ends up getting really, really sick, and she actually sees the younger version of herself. This is not the first time, obviously, that Yellowjackets has done something like this, but what's the purpose of doing this now?
Yeah.
I kind of feel like what we're seeing with Van is that she is really coming to terms with her own mortality and struggling with this idea of, okay, what's with all this gobbledygook about the wilderness versus what is right for me as a person. And I am starting to get to this point where I have said for a while that I kind of thought Van was going to be the last person standing because she was never going to die because of the lore of the show. I do think we're probably going to lose Van this season now.
Yeah, it was interesting to see the younger version of herself basically be like, you think you're unkillable? Like, nobody's unkillable. Like, I know that some stuff happened to you in the wilderness to make you think that, but
Yeah.
like, this is the reality of the situation. Everyone is mortal.
Yeah, and we talked about this, I think, back really in season 2, that it's fun to think of this whole Scooby-Doo phenomenon, that the ghost is really running around and taking out people, but the ghost is also just a person who's hiding in the mask of a ghost. And
Right.
sure, there could be some supernatural or spiritual forces at work, but I think tied to whatever those may be, which are ambiguous, I think there's going to be a human explanation for some things, and people are just kind of believing whatever it is they want to believe.
Absolutely. A lot like the mining theory that's been out there for quite a while now. This sort of idea that there's, poisonous gases or minerals that they've been
Yeah.
drinking and that they're kind of getting very loopy from it. And, we have seen a little bit of that with Lottie and them going to the cave and trying to
Yeah.
have these experiences or eating these mushrooms, but they're all, drinking the same red, muddy water from season 1. Could there be something that's in that if they're not boiling it properly enough?
Yeah, like there is like scientific explanations, psychological
be.
explanations. Like
Yes.
there's definitely a lot to dive into there, but this is where we are coming out of Yellowjackets season 3, episode 7, one that clearly is making us ask a ton of big questions. But who do you think gave this tape over, and where do you think the story is going now that Hilary Swank is seemingly about to show up? Let us know in the comments. Also, hit that subscribe button. You can support us further by joining our Patreon. That link is in the description below. We're covering there The Pit. We have Bosch Legacy and Andor on the way. Thank you to our patrons
Thank
so
you.
much. We'll see you here next time.